Well, welcome to the Spiritual Leadership Podcast. My name is Larry Chappell, and I'm here with my dad, Pastor Chappell, and we're here with a special edition coronavirus podcast. And I'm excited about the discussion that we're going to be having today. And also, we got a great group of guests with us. Why don't you introduce yourselves for our viewers?
Sure, I'll go first. Steve Chappell, pastor of Coastline Baptist Church. We're here in Southern California in the city of Oceanside.
Dave Delaney, pastor of First Baptist Church in Long Beach, California, and thankful to be a part of the conversation today.
Chris Edwards, I pastor Graceway Baptist Church all the way over on the other coast in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hey, we're really glad you guys are here, and since one of our guests is my brother Steve, I'm just going to have to remind you, you are on camera and you can't touch your face with your hands, all right? So just one of the coronavirus rules we've all learned. So
speaking of coronavirus rules, I think we're sitting here with the most paranoid coronavirus individual known to America right now. I'm shocked he took his mask off and we're sitting this close for this interview.
Well, it's family, but I do have my mask right here in case I do need it. So,
He's been known to walk in the room and spray Lysol on everybody. I'm not even kidding. Anyway, this has been a unique few weeks and really now about a month for all of our ministries. And so we just thought this would be a good opportunity to pull aside and talk about some of the things that the Lord has taught us, some of the things we've learned, maybe some of the blessings that you guys have led your churches into, maybe trying something different. And so we wanted just to take a minute and pause and reflect on this last month. And Uncle Steve, I'll start with you. Why don't you tell us how things have been different the last month and maybe some of the unique challenges that you've had and along with some of the blessings that you've seen?
I think we're all experiencing different, the same. I think we went into crisis mode when we got the news and realized, hey, this is going to be at first. Maybe we thought a couple weeks, a few weeks. And I think one of the things that I learned right off the bat is how incredibly nimble and flexible the church is. It was amazing to me to see what hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, oh no, what do we do? Clarity seemed to emerge rather quickly in terms of a short-term solution. Now, how we've adjusted in the weeks since, we've had to really work at pulling people in, and a lot of good has come from that. And I'm so happy to know that what we preach is true. And we know the church is not a building. We understand these things, but I've been personally blessed to see how our church has rallied around this, to see how leaders have emerged and the Zoom small groups and all the things that have gone on. And none of us prefer this. We all can't wait for services to resume as they had been. But certainly I can see how God has done some good things in terms of people rising up from within our church to do ministry.
Yeah, that's awesome. Brother Chris Edwards, what about you? You're on the other side of the country experiencing a lot of the same things.
Really a lot of the exact same restrictions that you guys are facing, we're facing here. And I think what I have sensed is a lot of superfluous energy that I was probably expending. I've been able to find maybe in the last 4 or 5 weeks that my level of involvement is not as necessary as I imagined it was in every facet of our ministry. I've also seen probably more clearly in this that we really have a multi-generational church here, and we are not able to communicate with everybody on the same level. And so we've really tried to kind of tier that in. We've had our deacons divide up the body, which had happened prior, but even within the staff in the way that we text and communicate. And just this week, we sent out a letter to everybody through the mail and put a church logo sticker decal for the car for everybody, just to say, we appreciate you, you're a part of something special. So we've learned that we're trying to communicate in various avenues to try to get to everybody, and then have really been blessed by, similar to Steve, watching our volunteers step forward and learn of and hear stories within the church, stuff that doesn't even make it to the church office, that is being dealt with just within the connection groups and families and friendship and that social structure, without it really being formalized, has been a blessing to see.
That's awesome. Dave, what about you?
Yeah, a lot of the same things, but I think one of the things that the Lord has taught me just personally about our church family is their resiliency to want to serve each other. They've come up with all kinds of creative ways to interact, sending cards back and forth, baked goods, their response to needs. So, one of the things we did was we assembled a list of people who had needs. They were calling the church and they needed grocery money or gas or, a bus ticket or whatever it may be. And then we had another list of people who were willing to meet those needs, and then just trying to facilitate those two things together. And it was, amazing to watch the church spring into action. And God has made us naturally spiritual and social beings. And that's something that the church facilitates for us, is that spiritual aspect of teaching and preaching from God's word, but also that social side of growing and caring and serving and, watching someone else develop in that way. And so it's neat to see the church still function in that most basic fundamental capacity, even though we aren't meeting as normal. So that's been a real blessing for us.
Amen.
That's awesome. Dad, I know you've learned a lot of lessons through all this.
Yeah, I really like what you said, Brother Chris, about the fact that a lot of our pastoral energy probably is, I think the word you use, superfluous. I think I'm a manager. I enjoy managing, leading, organizing. And so here you are, you can really do nothing but preach the word. And isn't that ironic? That's what we're called to do. So I have enjoyed more time in prayer and in preaching and preparing for preaching. And then secondarily, I said this from the very beginning, March 15th, we had our last service, and we had our people all around the campus in classes, and we taught online to the classes. And I said, the next several months, or however long this takes, is a time for us to be the church. Now, we can't assemble right now, I said, but we can still pray, we can still nurture, we can still give, we can still support missionaries, we can still be the church. And I've been so encouraged. So many things have been flipped on a dime as far as our school, our college, both going to online. And then last night, we had 1,500 people in small groups on Facebook Bible studies. I mean, I'm encouraged by the flexibility, like you said, Dave, of what I've seen with our church. And it's a testimony to what Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So it's been a humbling time for me, a time to kind of pull back and realize that, the old saying, when we work, when we pray, God works. And God's been working. We had a glitch. We had a great Easter service. We had a tremendous amount of viewers and such. We had a little glitch on our texting the results back in. So we don't really know exactly how many were saved, but we've had fruit throughout this month. I'm anxious to get back to the new normal, but I'm thankful for this season.
We'll talk in a minute when, how we as churches will kind of re-enter into assembling together. But how about in this moment, has there anything that any of you guys have done or tried differently that you thought, hey, let's adapt this into the new normal? Anything that you guys have tried or learned or done that you've thought, hey, we're going to continue doing this?
I'll start.
Go ahead, Dave.
So for me, I don't think I realized how much our people longed for some kind of daily interaction. And not maybe to the degree that we're doing it right now, but I think we'll certainly maintain some kind of form of contact through Facebook Live and streaming services, apart from our regular scheduled service time, and more of a casual conversation of leading and guiding in that way. I was kind of oblivious to that part of what our folks needed and have really enjoyed. So that's something we'll carry forward.
You know what I have really enjoyed is Zoom staff meetings. I've really enjoyed getting our staff together. I'm sitting in my office at home, and sometimes 10, 5, sometimes we've had almost 100 people on there for different meetings, and we're all on Zoom, and I'm able to share the content. What I find is you tend to be speaking with more clarity because you realize that it's in that venue, and so you're not sitting around wasting time, and it's not like, I got an opinion, and my this and that, and you know how staff meetings can go. They can
I think he likes Zoom meetings a little too much. Like we've taught him how to do it, and he just started sending out invites left and right.
Oh no, let me tell you my favorite part.
And he likes to mute
I can hit the
everybody.
mute button.
That's what he likes.
And say, so, and I understand the millennial staff have been saying, we like to get a little buy-in and a little pushback, and I'm like, boop, hit the mute button. Okay, let's do this or that. So, anyways,
honestly, it's been great.
Yeah.
It has been awesome.
It's I think actually expedited our meetings, and I actually feel, to answer Larry's question, we're going to use that video conferencing much more when this is over. I've had deacons meetings. I've been on Zoom conference calls with our congregational leaders, our county leaders, our city leaders. It's actually added a personal touch, Dave, like you said. And then one other thing we've done is the daily 10 o'clock prayer meeting with our church. We just called it Prayer and Perspective from the pastor's kitchen table. It's been so simple. Our tech team set me up on my computer. Did it this morning at 10 o'clock and probably had 1,000 people with us. Just quality. I mean, really, they're sharing prayer requests, we're praying, and it's been a blessing. So I don't know if I can do that every day when this is over, but I want to carry some of that with us. So how about you, Steve?
Yeah, I was going to go back to something Chris talked about the realization that multi-generations, we all tend to speak a different dialect of the same language. And, we've learned that. And I think one thing we've come to do much better during this season that I want to continue is our ability to stay in touch with people. And Dave, we kind of jumped in at the same time, and you got to the same place I was going in our attempt to get information out. And there's a balance, Larry. I'd be interested in your opinion on this. I think you can give too much content. It's just too much for people to get into. But the Bible studies, the videos, the comments, it's been interesting to me what, some guys on our team have said, you should try this. And I thought that'll never work. And that's what people liked, and so I think we've really done a much better job at learning how to communicate with all the different groups.
I think as the weeks have progressed through this this time of quarantine, we've probably you guys as well. We've adapted every single week, and we've stepped back and thought, what have we done? And we've moved our small group connection Zoom meetings from Sunday to Thursday because they were competing with the live stream schedule. And so I think we're kind of honing in on something that works for us because you're right, it can compete. But I think what you're doing, what you and Mom are doing with the devotionals is meeting another need, and it's not competing with your message on Sunday.
Honestly, it's pastoral work, and it's enjoyable. And I told Mom, I said, because we were talking about how often we're going to do this, and several people have said, keep doing it. How would I be able, like this morning, how would I be able to visit hundreds of homes like that? And yet we do it every morning, and we have prayer with our people. It's really been a blessing.
Yeah, I don't think it. I think we all would agree. Nothing can replace face-to-face in-home interactions. But what I've seen, even with our teens, is how much they've appreciated and how many more of them I can visit. We had our Zoom class last night with 30 teens, and the engagement was great. I know from a youth perspective. We started a YouTube page, and we did some things that we probably should have been doing this whole time along. And so in that way, I've viewed this time as a blessing to kind of reevaluate and connect with even some, you talk about languages, for teenagers, that's their language, YouTube. And so some of the teams that we've had a tough time connecting with in person, we've made great connection with on YouTube. And so God's taught us some things through that.
I've found communicating with our church leadership, people are really rallying, and that has been an encouragement to see that people are willing to step up to the needs. I think Dave mentioned some of that, and I've been thrilled to see that. I also think that when it comes to my personal preaching, I have really been more concentrated on my content, and I think that's something that's going to carry forward, because I've been forced at times to watch myself and realize that 30 minutes of that is plenty. And I've also kind of spread out our speaking engagements just a little bit, because when you take away the fellowship aspect of the service, somebody's not coming in and seeing their friend, they're not engaged in conversation, they're not in their service role, and you really boil it down to me in front of them teaching, I've realized we have to spread that out a little bit to staff and to give some different opportunities so that it's not just me all 3 times a week, because we've stripped it down so much, just to get people to tune in, we're trying to even change the venues and the formats that they're seeing us in, because I know they're flooded right now with content. So I think it's prompted us to be a little creative. We've purchased stuff, we've set things in motion like you referenced, we should have been doing a while ago. And until it was a necessity, we were maybe apathetic about it.
Steve, don't you normally have 3 services on Sunday? Do you preach 3
Yeah,
times?
recently we went to 2 with the addition of more parking and nurseries, but yeah.
So you're really preaching 1 Sunday morning sermon now. How many times are you airing that sermon?
We air it 3 times on Sunday, and we record it in advance because the thought was we reduce the risk of technical problems. And it's made for some strange Sunday mornings. I still get up and come down to the church just because it's what a pastor does, you know. But yeah, it's really an unusual.
Now, in light of what Chris said about, watching yourself for 30 minutes, is it true that there's a citywide petition to get you to go to 19 minutes per sermon?
Yeah, you started that petition. So
I think it's
her signature.
I think it's actually up here in Lancaster. I'm not sure, but to that point, we have really found my sermons have been going about 27 minutes, and then the altar call extended for 2 or 3, because I think without commercials, because people, when they're watching something on the screen, they're used to commercial breaks, and we've been using the lower thirds and having some slides and things that we do, and that helps. But I do think there's less of an attention span online. So I think, like I say, we're learning, and every week stepping back, saying, how can we make it different? One of the things I wanted to talk with you guys about, and Larry, maybe you can help us with this a bit too, is just the whole idea of coming back into and engaging back into ministry. And it seems like there's several layers, and I'm just going to mention those real quickly. First layer governing us is God's word. We ought to obey God rather than men. Also, a part of God's word is to obey those that have rule over us, Romans 13. Then we have the federal government saying, let's roll back out. Then we have the state government saying, not until August. Then you might have local government saying, if you make a plan with, certain safety measures in mind. So, I really feel like we're all in that moment right now and trying to figure out when to get back. And I'd like to talk about the when and the how a little bit. And Chris, if we could maybe start with you. I don't know what's going on in North Carolina. We're out here in a state that, frankly, if no fundamental evangelical church ever met again, our leaders wouldn't be sad. So there's not a real sensitivity. In fact, marijuana shops are an essential industry in California, but church gathering is not essential. So that's kind of where we are. But where are you, and what is the thought about when you're going to get back?
We're very similar. I mean, we have a Democratic governor, vape shops and the liquor stores are open, and we're under the same 10 people rule. Where we're at moving forward, I'm probably going to wait. I've looked at it as far as we obviously want to be faithful to the Lord. I've also considered our testimony and reputation within the community and have been sensitive to how we are perceived. And that's dictated a few of our decisions. We even pre-recorded some stuff for Easter. We ran a banner underneath because I knew that they would see more than 10 people on the stage. We were careful to articulate that there were never more than that amount of people in the building at once. Moving forward, I'm probably going to wait until restrictions are eased and some of those things are communicated, again, trying to be sensitive to our perception within the community as caring, as law-abiding. And then when we do come back together, you referenced earlier, Pastor Chappell, probably kind of a hybrid of keeping some of these online opportunities. I don't see how we could avoid that. We're probably going to keep some of our seniors with those early morning opportunities. We're going to add some services to the Sunday morning with the explicit attempt to thin down the crowd. Our building is far too small for the crowd that we bring, and we're already having to park and shuttle from another parking lot. So people are already sensitive to some of those things. I believe it's just going to be heightened. So I wouldn't know yet what that looks like time-wise.
Yeah.
But we're waiting.
Dave, any thoughts that you've had down in Long Beach?
Well, I think first I would commend the churches for doing a great job of being sensitive to their congregations in closing, and then also being submissive to governmental authorities and following protocols and stay-at-home orders and those things. I think the churches have done a good job with that. And of course, as we move forward, it's going to, there's going to be difficult questions, I think, to answer. But I think my response to when should the churches open or how would be, we should do so carefully. And we should assess and monitor our individual situations. The last thing any pastor wants on his conscience is coming back and exposing your people to some kind of sickness that puts them in greater jeopardy than where they currently are. So I think we'd want to be slow about that. And I like the idea that you mentioned about maybe restructuring even how we did some of those things.
Steve?
Yeah, I'm with all of that. I think just a little bit bigger picture, religious liberty. I think we've all been concerned by some of the statements by the mayor of New York City about, if a church violates, they'll forever be shut down. And even recently, I've heard of the governor of Kentucky, requiring officers to write down the license plate numbers of Christians. And I think there's something in all of us, and we hear things like, it bothers us, and it should.
Right.
But I think with all of us, we don't know what we're going to do because we don't know what's going to happen. And I do want to err on the side of caution for the safety of people. I view that what we've done to this point, almost everyone, we're cooperating with our leaders in this attempt to keep people safe. And I think that's honoring to the Lord. It's good for people. And, our plan at this point to come back is when we're told it's safe. And when we reach a point where we feel as though that's not being communicated, I guess that's another conversation to be had.
Well, I tell you, I feel personally a sense of how it's going to come down. I think a lot of leaders right now are taking a pretty strong stand with respect to the safety issues, which is needful. I feel, secondly, we have been submissive, which is biblical. But I think there will come a point when the American public is demanding that they can work and that they can come out. And I think the church is going to be a part of that, not in a rebellious fashion, but there's a lot of pent-up desire to safely gather together, right? So with respect to that issue, we are going to have to sense the leading of the Lord in the process. And I think there's levels, and I would just mention this to all our pastors that are watching. First of all, we have the highest level, which is the Lord, and every individual pastor is going to have to lead out as the Lord leads him. I really do believe that. And so we may not all start on the same Sunday in the same state, right? But then you have the federal level. I think they're starting to create a little momentum. The states, some are more for the church, some are not as much. And then the local. So one thing I would say is every one of us should establish right now a relationship with our mayor, and we should get the conversation going. This week I have a conference call with 100 pastors in California, along with my mayor, who's an attorney, and Dr. David Gibbs. And the conversation will be the when and the how. And I think it's important that, because I hear the federal government and the state governments deferring a little bit to the local governments. So you definitely want to have that relationship cultivated before Comeback Sunday. So we're going to be having over the next few weeks what we're calling Drive-By Sunday. One is a drive-by. We're saying drive by, drop off a can for a needy family and say hi to the pastoral staff. Don't get out of your car, wave, and keep driving. So drive by, right? We're going to probably have 2 or 3 drive-by Sundays, and then we're looking forward to having a drive-in Sunday, right? And that might be a service in the parking lot, or it might be in the building with certain limitations. But I think anything we can do to just keep our folks coming into the habit of Sunday morning is really super important. Some of the other things I think we need to be thinking about, and I'll just throw these out quickly. We need to have a model written with respect to what that first Sunday looks like. And we need to think in terms of liability and risk. And that model is going to include things such as who wears masks. Maybe everybody wears a mask. Do you need to add a couple services so that you can keep 6 feet rules? And you need to write it down so that if someone comes to harass or there's a problem, you can say, look, here's our written policies. I've actually been writing a list of do's and don'ts that we're going to email to the church family, right? Don't shake hands, don't hug, right? Do keep the social distancing. And you're going to have signage in your property explaining what your policies are. So now's the time to start planning that, because whether we get back a month or 2 from now, whatever the timing is, we're going to need to make sure that we have pre-ordered hand sanitizer stations, many more than we have right now. And you're going to need to verbalize that to your people. I'm going to verbalize to all of our folks that are 65 and over that they should just stay at home right now if they're 65 or over, or if they have an underlying condition. When we come back for the first few weeks, that they're welcome to stay at home and watch live stream. So there's many different things of this nature. I think an altered schedule. We're probably not going to try to have both services, Sunday school, Sunday night, everything. Talk about germ spreading and all of that. Our Sundays around here are crazy that way. So we'll probably have 2 services instead of 4 for the first 2 or 3 weeks back. And a lot of different thoughts that way. But my challenge would be get to know your local authorities, kind of get the pulse of what they're going to say. And our mayor is saying things like, show me a chart of how it would look. I'm not telling you when, but I'd like to know what you're thinking. And then secondly, begin conveying to your church what you feel it's going to look like policy-wise, and then prepare your campus, right? How many kids are you going to let in a classroom? Are you having classrooms? And write it all down so that you have a record of what you have done to limit exposure to your people. Because at some point we're going to have to take that risk element and that faith element, pray through both, and then lead. And I will say, Steve, and then I'll stop talking, Larry, but I would say that the religious liberty issue does concern me, because at the end of the day, the state cannot tell us when, where, and how to worship. And we are being compliant, and we should be. And we as pastors are shepherds. I don't want anybody getting sick on my watch. And Larry will tell you, I've been spraying Lysol everywhere and telling everybody to wear their mask. But there's going to be a point when God tells me, start getting the people back. And do it safely and do it in small groups. But we have a command to assemble. So I think we should be preparing right now for that.
I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to read the statement by Attorney General Barr this last week, but I thought he said some good things. And I think as far as we talked about this, where we need to be really looking is when there's an additional rule imposed upon churches. You know, like if they're going to let theaters reopen, but not churches. Right. Or if they'll let drive-through restaurants, but not drive-through churches. I feel like that's where we really need to have our awareness heightened. Because I do think that potentially during times like this, there are a lot of state governors that are not friendly towards what we're doing. I also feel like not every move they make is malicious towards us either. So it's where we got to use wisdom and balancing all that out. But I do think.
Yeah, we don't need crazy rhetoric. We don't need to be preaching against every liberal governor. They love that. But we definitely need to lead when God tells us to lead. And before we have those first services, we need to train our deacons and our ushers rather. You know, how do we let people in? How do we seat people? And our nursery workers, are we going to take the temperatures of the babies that we admit to the nurseries going forward? I think we will. So there's a lot of, the culture of church will change. And not everyone will come back in immediately anyways, and that helps us with social distancing. But we have to be ready. When I say the culture, I don't mean the biblical culture from the standpoint of, you know, preaching and singing and fellowshipping, but I mean this coronavirus is going to affect the way we do things.
We'll go around one more time. Steve, we'll start with you. Do you have anything to add or comment on that, or have you begun any of these thought processes as far as how you will return?
Yeah, it's interesting to me. There are people in our church like your guys's that are just gripped with fear. I mean, they just live every day in absolute fear. And I've got an equal number who think this is the dumbest thing in the world. And honestly, I don't even care to have a judgment on who's right or wrong. I want to meet them where they are and try and help them. But leading back to what was just said about when services come back, I've been involved in conversations where we've talked about that comeback Sunday, and comments like, "We'll have a big potluck" and all these things, and it sounds it's going to be
Finger
a
foods.
gradual. Yeah, that would probably be a tough first Sunday back. But I think those who are more frightened are going to be a little slower to come back. I think they're going to take a wait and see approach, and that's fine. But I think as much as we've learned to this point, I think when we're allowed to start having services again, the learning curve starts all over, and we're going to have to adjust to how are things going to be done now.
I have a question, if I can jump in here. Chris, maybe, and Dave. How are you guys sensing the financial impact? I have an immediate financial impact concern. We obviously have hundreds of employees here. And it's been, we've had to cut back and cut some hours and things. So I'm looking at today, but I'm looking at the potential recession and the long term and trying to trim our budget in order to stay fiscally responsible. What have you all seen out in North Carolina?
We're old school, and we did not have an online giving option. And we were in the process of launching a new website, and in accordance with that, just a month ago, kicked in online giving and have been abundantly blessed, and really to a staggering degree. But that being said, if I was looking out past just the immediate, we are also in the process with our architect, our contractor, our engineer on building the second phase here. We would normally have every May what we would call our Victory Sunday, which is a Faith Promise Sunday strictly for construction projects in our building. That's not going to happen. I would be preaching stewardship messages right now, and it doesn't feel appropriate. So that'll actually bump that into the next fiscal year. So
Right.
There's going to be fallout for this for 6 months, but the immediate, we're sensing that people are responding in a very generous fashion, but it's changing things, planning steps down the line.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's changing the planning steps. We were on the cusp of rolling out a new formatted building plan and structure for us, and this has really changed all that. And in that sense, I kind of thank the Lord for that, because the way that we had modeled the potential auditorium setup was not with any kind of social distancing aspects involved. So, we're really working at redoing that plan. But the second thing I would say is our people have been faithful in giving.
Amen.
And our churches, they're blue collar workers, and they're day laborers. This is the makeup of the structure of the city that we live in. And they've been faithful to the Lord, but that faithfulness does look a little bit different. We did have online giving in place before this, and about 85% of our church has gone that direction. So I think when we come back, we probably won't pass offering plates. We'll just have them at the back door. We want to cut down on any kind of that, hand-to-hand contact that, could potentially take place. So we're trying to trim that down for us. But, you do have to look long-term at the picture as well, with potential restructuring of even what you need on a campus, because it may be different, for the next 3 months, 4 months, whatever that looks like.
You get the sense that a lot of the paper that we print, bulletins, a lot of the meetings we have are going to go away. Like I've already decided we're not going to have bulletins when we get back. And our offerings have been somewhat down, but our online giving every week, I think we've added 200 online givers. And so I'm praying that the long-term effect will be strengthening rather than a weakening. But I've found that a lot of our older givers, they really do prefer to still mail their offering in, and that's fine. But we have not had a catastrophic fall, but we've had enough of a constriction that we're trying to plan. You take a 5 or 10% constriction and multiply it for 12 months in a ministry like ours, it's a large amount of money. So we're having to consider those kinds of issues just to be good stewards. So Steve, how about you? Have you guys on your offerings held up or?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just about every metric we use to evaluate church health is gone right now. And so the offerings of interest, obviously for financial reasons, but that's one way to kind of measure, hey, are the people still in this? And our church, with online giving and those who do like bill pay through their bank, it was about 70% of our offering was given that way prior to this. And we've added families since then. If I were to guess, I'd say we probably are down maybe 4 or 5% since this started. But I'm grateful for that. Chris mentioned building program, and actually Dave did as well. We've got drawings in with the city right now at a Zoom conference on that yesterday. And it's been interesting. Our building giving has been maybe stronger during this season. And why that blesses me is at least some people in our church are still looking for the future.
Amen.
And that was just a special encouragement to me.
I think our people are looking for the future, and now we're going to go more on a cash basis because of the age of our church and just some disciplines I'm putting in, but we are going to move forward with our college offices, which is the first phase of our Kid City building. It's going to be 3 or 4 months later than originally planned, but I haven't given up, and I agree, I hear people talking about that all the time. One quick question for you, Steve, just on a personal note. We all saw on the news the other day the guy on the surfboard that was arrested. Was that you?
No, that was not me.
I know you've been itching to get out there. So, I mean, I know
the beaches are closed. It's terrible.
Your beaches are closed?
They are.
Yeah, because there's religious liberty, then there's personal liberty. And I thought I saw you on a surfboard with some kind of a flag that said, "Don't tread on me," or something like that. But anyways, it's been a little bit of a stir-crazy time. For me, it's been kind of nice just to get into the office and do a few things like this. I got to tell you, though, on a personal level, I've enjoyed having some evenings at home with my wife. I've had years, over the last 20 years, I've had seasons where I've been in church 16, 18 nights in a row, 4 or 5 states in a row, and to sit down and build a puzzle and eat ice cream with my wife, it's been awesome. And so when you talk about the basics of family, the basics of prayer, the basics of time in the Word, there have been some blessings, I think, for all of us with respect to that. Now, it feels funny not getting together with the staff and not having a lot to do. And it's funny it's hard sometimes to pay sometimes people that aren't even coming in. You know, all of that's weird, but there's been blessings in the midst of a weird season.
It's funny because we have this like semi-annual discussion where we look at the calendar and we look at it and we say, our calendar's way too fat. We have way too many events. What can we cut? And it's been just near impossible for us to make any decisions because we like everything that's on the calendar. But this year has been, I mean, it got all of it got cut, and it's been in some ways just kind of a divine reset as we've now looked at things on the calendar. And I know you're praying a ton about what to bring back and what not to bring back, and just a fresh look at everything.
Yeah, I think, I'm a traditionalist. Everybody knows that. I'm conservative, all that. But I think so my type, personality, can get nervous about simplifying. But the fact is that our church will be a simpler church coming out of this because God forced us to put some busyness to the side and just stuff that we do. And He's showing us that that His Word is enough. And so I pray that we can not clutter back our schedule just immediately from this. And I want to just say, and as we wrap this up today, that the church is the Lord's church, and that He is sovereign in these affairs. And so He's allowing this, and we won't know every reason for it until we're through it. But we know that that Romans 8:28 is ours to claim today. And I want to thank each of you for just giving your perspective and sharing with us some of the lessons that you're learning. And I want to say to our pastors across the nation, pastor friends, that we love you, we're praying for you. If you have ideas or thoughts, be sure to email us here at the Spiritual Leadership Podcast. If you have questions, we're going to do a similar podcast a few weeks from now, just following up on this, and maybe right before we enter into this new phase of ministry, we'd love to answer those if you have some specific questions. Thank you for all that you've done to promote the Spiritual Leadership Podcast by taking the podcast and pushing it out on social media, sharing the link. That means a lot to us. We want to be a blessing to churches that are taking a stand and reaching souls in this day. And Larry, thank you for all of your help setting up. And is there anything you want to close with today?
No, I don't have anything to add, but why don't we do this? We'll go around one more time, and we'll start, Steve, with you. Tell us what you're preaching. We just came through Easter, so what's your next preaching series?
I think all of us are probably going through passages just that are deeply encouraging. You know, Sunday's Psalm 62, I'm waiting on the Lord. And well, you didn't ask this, but I'll add this. Coming back from this, I'm going to enter right into a series on the church, who we are and what we do. And I think that'll kind of help us to reset. And I think you used that word, Larry. I love it. This is a divine reset in so many ways. Yeah. So that's where we are.
That's awesome. Dave?
We are going through, just starting actually this Sunday, the book of Philippians, so the book of joy. And that's been encouraging. We've been in the Psalms on Sunday nights, so we've stuck through with that. We were in Revelation, but we put a pause on that study. I didn't Revelation or Job right now is probably not the most encouraging passage to go to. So Psalms and Philippians.
As soon as it happened, we missed our first Sunday. I started a series called Priorities Under Pressure, the idea of how we should live life in these pressure-filled moments. And instead of stewardship, I had to make an adjustment. And I'm preaching a series. I'm calling it I'm Not Okay. The idea of when things aren't okay with us, David in the 32nd Psalm, he's not okay because he hasn't confessed his sins, that kind of idea. So I'm going to take about 4 or 5 weeks with the idea of I'm not okay, but God can fix every area that I'm not okay in.
We kicked off a series last week called Only Jesus, and we're just looking at 5 weeks. We're looking at things that only Jesus can do from the standpoint of forgiving sin. This week from healing a troubled heart, John 14, let not your heart be troubled, and looking at the restoration and the acceptance that he gives in the following week. So Only Jesus. I am planning probably around the 1st of June to jump into a prophecy series, and we're going to move into a Signs of the Times series, and we are going to touch into events of the world leading into the tribulation that can be expected, including pestilences. I think people are asking, what's going on here, and leading into the rapture of the church and so forth. So Only Jesus and then Signs of the Times, that's where we're headed between now and June. Sunday nights, I've jumped out of my series that I was preaching in Philippians, and I'm doing right now just assorted messages of comfort. And this Sunday night is James chapter 1, and just letting patience have its complete work. And I think you never go wrong preaching to a broken heart.
Well, thank you, each of you, for joining us for this discussion. I know I've enjoyed it, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast today. And like my dad said, some great episodes right around the corner. So thanks again for all of you who tuned in today.